Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, we see you flipping slides.
Yeah. Yes, I'm sharing the full screen. I shared the application before. It seems doesn't work.
Okay, I guess we should get going. I got 12:01 my time. We can chat. I was typing. I think Henk, I think you're also unmuted. I think the typing we hear might have been you.
That might have been. Oh, okay. Then I will mute.
Tianren, you want to kick us off?
Yes, I can do this. Okay. Let's start. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Opsawg and Ops area meeting. This is an online virtual meeting for IETF 109. As usual, we start from the note well. Please make sure you understand the note well and those important legal issues. Basically, all the contributions, including your write-up, the presentation, the audio, video, need to follow the IETF rules. Firstly, we come to the Opsawg. It's chaired by Tianren, Joe, and Hank. We would like to welcome Hank as our co-chair. Hank, would you like to say something?
Thanks, Tianren. Yeah, hi all. This is Hank. I'm joining ranks with Joe and Tianren apparently, and yeah, I'm going to support chair duties. I have a tiny IoT background. People might have seen me in the IETF, and yeah, I'm happy to help.
Good.
We're happy to have you here. Thanks, Hank.
Yeah. And the blue sheet is automatically recorded. Is there any volunteer for Minute and Jabber?
Well, I'll volunteer for minutes. I've already got Cody MD up, and if you're going to flip the slides, Tianren, I'll try to keep up with the minutes here in Etherpad.
Yeah. And the Jabber?
I'll look at Jabber if I need to. No problem. Rob also just chatted with me that he can help with minutes. So we've got Rob Wilton and I on minutes, and I'll keep an eye on the chat Jabber tab too.
Okay, good. Here is the working group status. And during the past 3 months, the RFC 8886 and RFC 8907 are published from this working group. And congratulations to the authors and thanks to the contributors. The Young Model Automation Framework draft is now in the RFC queue. We do not have much thing to do. The TACS-YAN data model is sent to the ASG. The network telemetry framework draft finished the working group last call. We are waiting for the Shepherd write-up. We newly adopted 3 drafts: the VPN Common YAN model, MUD TLS profiles, finding and using geofeed data, and two existing drafts, the L2NM and L3NM, are going well. All of them are very readable. I encourage more people to read and comment. And Joe and Hank, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think Alex Clem is acting as shepherd on NTF, as I recall, or maybe I think it was NTF. And we will be hearing from the L3 SM&M, L2NM, and the common model here. We just adopted geofeeds. I think Randy commented that the submission queue had just closed, but now that it reopened, it's been rebranded as an Opsawg document. Everything is up. All of these slides that you'll be seeing are up in Data Tracker. There is a ops area section at the end of this. Rob was telling me that they were a little late in getting the slides, so I imagine if they have anything, we'll get that up in Data Tracker as well for you to look at. Yeah, I think that's all I had to add here.
Great. And any more questions? And here is the agenda. We got 8 topics. Any agenda question? If no, let's start the presentation. And the first one, the multi-TLS profiles. Anybody to present?
Tutor's here. Can you join the the queue?
I cannot control the panel because I'm sharing the screen. It's full screen.
Yeah, I'm looking at the panel. But I can't seem to. Here he is.
Hey, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Hey, thanks. This is Thiru here. I'll be presenting updates to our multi-TLS profiles for IoT devices draft. Next slide, please. The draft was recently adapted by the working group after several comments from both this working group and TLS working group. So in the last couple of revisions, we've been updating the draft to address these comments. So I'll be going over these major updates and taking any further questions and comments. Next slide, please. One of the major comments that we got from the TLS working group was to not include any TLS values which we were including in the prior versions. The main reason was that these values are supposed to be used for test purposes to test the extensibility failures in case if the peers are not able to understand the new parameters and start failing. So that was one of the major comments, that for feature extensibility we should not be including grease parameters, and we have updated the TLS GTLS profiles parameters not to include any more grease values, and this also allows to have random values to be incorporated in future TLS parameters. With this change, the way that the network security service would start enforcing policies is basically only if the network security service is aware of known TLS parameters, it would enforce policies. Otherwise, it would just simply ignore those parameters which are unknown to it. Next slide, please. I have listed few examples just to demonstrate how this extensibility is introduced and how misbehavior from an IoT device because of a malware or unauthorized software would be detected. For example, if a DTLS parameter is not specified in the MUD TLS profile, but it is recognized by firewall, then in that case, it would recognize that as an unrecognized software or unauthorized software and can take remediation action. For example, in this case, if the Chacha20 cipher stream is not specified in the MUD TLS profile, but the parameter is already known to firewall, then the firewall can take various actions. Either it could be blocking the flow or quarantining the IoT device and remediating the device. Next slide, please. The other one, which is the major one for to handle cases where you have grease values or any other unknown values. In those cases, the firewall would not take any action. For example, in case where the Chacha20 cipher stream is not specified in the TLS profile and it is unknown, then the firewall would ignore it. So this is very similar to grease values being ignored by firewall, as those values will never be specified in the MUD TLS profile. Next slide, please. Uh, this is the problem probably with the race conditions, that whether the IoT device gets updated with the new TLS extensions or TLS versions versus the firewall getting updated before that. So, for example, if the IoT devices get updated to support new extensions or new ciphers and the firewall is not ready, then what would happen is the MUD TLS profile would get updated. The new cipher stream, for example, Chacha20 would be specified in the MUD TLS profile, but the firewall would see that this parameter is unknown to it, and immediately an alert would be triggered to the IT administrator or the IoT device owner, and as well as the firewall vendor who is giving the network security service. The same applies to any other TLS extension or even new TLS versions. For example, if there is a new TLS version, for example, TLS 1.3, and it's specified in the MUD TLS profile, but the firewall is not aware of it, then an alert would be triggered. So this basically ensures that both the administrator of the IoT device and the network security provider are aware of the firewall not recognizing new parameters, and if the firewall is not readily updatable, its protection efficacy is going to decrease with time. Next slide, please. We have also updated the Yang module to address several comments that we received from Med and others, especially to make sure that we have an INR DTLS Yang profile to include the DTLS versions and DTLS parameters, and those values are being used in the ACL, which in turn is used in the MUD TLS profile. Next slide, please. We have also updated the Yang module to say that whether the device is indeed supporting the TLS DTLS profile or not. So a Boolean value is introduced so that it would signal to the network security device whether the manufacturer is already supporting this extension or not, and that would enable the network security service to realize that it's not supporting and it has to upgrade its software to parse and understand these new TLS profiles. Next slide, please. All the parameters that we have in the INR TLS profile are indeed picked from TLS and DTLS INR registries, excluding TLS version, DTLS version, SPKI pin set, and certificate authority. SPKI pin set is basically pinning a specific public key or a certificate like self-signed certificate, and certificate authorities are specific to each IoT device. We've seen IoT device based on manufacturer, make, and model use specific certificate authorities which vary from device type to device type, and those values have to be defined, has to be maintained and defined by the manufacturer itself. INR DTLS profile, TLS and DTLS profiles does not maintain any registries for DTLS versions because the way the versions are maintained today is because of extensibility. In TLS 1.3, a new extension has been introduced in which the version is defined. So that's the reason they are not maintaining any registry for that. So those are the parameters which are not present in the TLS and DTLS INR registries, and those are the ones that are being defined in this specification. And whenever it's pretty easy to update the YANG modules because we have new registries. Whenever the DTLS versions or DTLS parameter registry is added with a new version or a parameter, then the YANG module would be automatically updated by INR. Next slide, please. That's it. And any further comments and suggestions are welcome on the draft. Thank you.
Any comments, questions?
Don't see anyone coming in the queue. Yep. Rob Wilton is in the queue. Rob.
So it's just a quick question, really. I missed the very beginning of this slides deck. I just want to check whether the SecDR folks have had a chance to have an early review of this, just to check the TLS side of that, or maybe they're already hooked in. So that was only a question.
This draft was posted before adoption to both TLS and OPS Security Working Group. So we had received several of these updates were done to address the comments that we had received from the TLS Working Group.
Brilliant, thanks. So everyone's in step.
Yeah.
If there's no more comments, so we will go to the next. This one, the second. Matt? Matt?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah. Yeah, so this will be I would say a quick update of the what we have done on the VPN command draft. So if you can just please move to the next slide. So yeah. So since the draft was adopted last September, we went into two revisions of the draft, and the draft was already, I would say, worked out in the background with the team working on the various VPN pages there. So that's why we have already, I would say, a fair stable version when we presented the document to the working group. So the first version that we released addresses mainly the comment that we received during the working group last call. So there's some, I would say, minor editorial ones from the rule to better articulate how the common VPN model will, I would say, can be reused by future revisions of the current IL3 service model and IL2. We think that we have now, I would say, better text so that people will understand that this VPN camel model can be reused when there is any future revisions of this document. There's also one, I would say, important and good comment from Italo about the scoping of the VPN common model. As you remember, during the last meeting, we have presented the scope to be restricted only to types and grouping that will be reused by all the four models. And but Italo think that we need to relax that a little bit, so that if at least there are two models that are reusing some of this type, we need to define them into the common model. In the beginning, I personally don't want to get to that path, because otherwise there is a risk that we would like to be, I would say, more exhaustive there, and that can, I would say, delay the publication of the IL3NM. But after all, after discussion with the team and also with the implementers, I think that's as we are just defining some kind of library, it's just fine to relax that constraint, and we can put there what we think that are really available and reusable from the current model. So we updated the document to include, I would say, specific items that are not reused, for example, in the L3 NM draft, but are will be reused in the L2 NM. There was also a comment from Itaru about the overall scope of the draft. He proposed that we not restrict the kernel types and the groups only to the VPN, but to define it as a service generic model. And that one, I think, for me, we are going too far there. So we discarded that comment. And we think that, so that there are models that are currently worked in the C camp working, for instance, that can reuse this model, but it's up to them to decide and to justify why they want to reuse it. But we cannot claim on our side that we will cover every service. So we want something that will be really aligned and focused and restricted to what the Opsawg working group is doing, that is that VPN services. We included a note in the draft to make that sure. And the last modification we have made is about, it's more, I would say, to include more description, more I would say missing references clauses then, as Tom Petch has proposed in the working group last call. So I think that we have done, I would say, most of the exercise. There are always things to be completed, but I think that we have made some fair progress on that part. And as you can see in the next slide, we also released a second version there. Actually, when we started to seriously work on the L2NM, we have found that there are some, I would say, some grouping there that that can be moved to the common one, and that are also can be reused also in the in L2NM. So we simplified also again the L2NM and moved many of the groupings and types into the common model, and we have updated all the three models, that is the L2NM, L3NM, and the VPN common model. So right now I would say the current pending, I would say, action from on our side, as you can see in the next slide, is that as far as we will progress on the L2NM, and given that we think that we are already have a stable version on the L3NM, we will keep monitoring how things are moving, so that we can update if required the common model to make or move some of the components that we will find in the L2NM into to the common one. Next slide, please. So this is what I was mentioning, the second bullet here about the synchronization between the other streams we have. Joe has already sent a request to the young doctors to have an early review of the document, as we think that's we start to have something which is I would say in good shape. Modulo this I would say this pending action on the L2NM. So we hope to have, I would say, feedback from them, and we will address that as soon as we receive them. So the plan here is to wait to have a working last call for the full set of the VPN documents, meaning the L2NM, L3NM, and the VPN common model. And as usual, we need fresh eyes on the document, as it's more than a year rounds that we are looking on these documents, and it's always good to have outsider to look into the document and to give us their reviews and comments, so that we can react on them as soon as possible. And this ends my presentation. So if there are any question or comment, please not hesitate.
Yeah, a clarifying question, Med. Back a few slides, Tianren, if you could. One, keep going back. That one. When you said working group last call, you meant comments raised during the adoption call.
Yeah. That's only yeah. It's the adoption call. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I wanted to make sure. So you commented on the thing. Yeah. These will be they'll go through last call altogether, and we just put in a working Yang Doctor early review. I've read the latest common model document. No major thoughts on my part as a contributor, but one thing I noticed is there are a few comments in there early on, like this might be applicable to L2 XMs or something along that, and I thought I like that. I like that you were at least initially starting to group things or have elements that one might use in this type of model, either at a certain layer or at a certain type of Yang module. But it seemed to get lost towards the end, meaning, at least the way I read it, things seem to be mixed between SMs and L3 and L2, and I guess my suggestion is more of a knit, really, is I like that organization to be able to, where possible, keep things side by side where they make sense, so that if I'm looking for things that are, I don't know what the best kind of organization is, but if I'm looking for things that are more maybe L2 versus L3, and then within that you have NM versus SM, I just thought that would have been easier to read through some of the Yang module semantics and kind of understand where I might find things that I could extract. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a fair comment that we will think, yeah, how to make this better. Yeah.
Thanks. Other questions or comments from the working group? I don't see anyone coming up to the queue, Med, so I think you're good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next one. Oscar will present.
Hi, good morning, guys. So now that Med has presented you the common module, now we are gonna go through the two modules, the L3 and the L2 modules that use this one. So here also you have the Git repos where we keep all the issues. So in the L3NM repo, we keep all the issues for L3NM. In the L2NM1, the similar for L2. However, we decided to keep all the junk together in the L3NM repo for better checking. So we do continuous checks on the junks of the three modules together. Okay, so if you want to go for the latest code, is the L3NM repo that holds all of them, the common L2 and L3. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so first I'm going to tell you a couple of slides about what are the latest changes since the last IETF. So we were waiting to have the common module to address all the young doctors review comments. So now finally, in the latest published version, we have addressed all the comments. So there were some minor editorial issues like the NMDA compliance, revision dates, some just minor editorial. We also had some clarifications of the use of Appendix A. So we included this list of available implementations. So we just follow the guidelines for RFC 6982 about the implementation status section. So we put all the clarifications. Also, we did a lot of cleanup of the groupings. So you know that the first version of L3NM had a lot of groupings. So now all the groupings are in the common module. So here we are reusing all of them. So in the latest version available in Git, I think we have only one grouping left in L3NM, and it's just a pure L3 specific grouping that is not NM grouping, that is not reusable for other parts. Okay. So this new young module uses all the VPN common that has been explained. So also we added some text in the draft explaining the rationale and which are the relation with this common module. Also, we added some section on the sample uses of the L3NM model, so to explain. So, for example, how to use it for enterprise layer 3 VPN services, for multi-domain cases, and we plan to add some more here, just explanation. Okay. Also, we added some completed explanations of the different sections of the draft. So, for example, we explained the role of the VPN profiles and some examples. There was also some change to add the VPN type to include the kind of service signaling type here. Also, we added some text to explain the multicast. So, next slide, please. Also, we added some text to explain the underlay transport. You know that the underlay transport here is in the VPN. What are you using to between the PEs? So, for example, if you are using traffic engineering, if you are using LDP, segment routing, etc. Okay. Then this complements to there is some work done in the TIAS working group where they are doing the extensions. Okay, so if you choose to have a TIAS underlay transport, all the extensions that tell you which is the mapping is that of the mapping of the T tunnels to the service itself. That is done in TIAS working group, extending the L3NM. Okay. Also, we had an issue pending. I think it was like the last 2-3 IETFs. We had a lot of discussions on the RD assignment or auto assignment, and we had a lot of discussions in the list and implementation feedback. So we finally got.
Hey, well, Joe, I'm not like seeing anything under the show your hands tool, so just count me as a +1.
Sorry?
All right.
There was a comment? That we show the auto assignment. We have a choice now with the 4 option, with a directly assigned, with a pool, a full auto assign, and no RD. So this is the selected choice. So please go on. Next slide. So we have just in this version we solve all the open issues in GitHub. So we have just a few open issues since the last one. So you see that I have numbered here the issues in GitHub. So you see we are in the 180 something just open because all the previous one were closed. So there are just some minor editorial things to finalize. So to double check all the trees in the document and review the readability of the draft of the different sections, review all the BGP descriptions. We have some suggestions also, for example, for the if we want to incorporate to the Young model service feasibility flag. Okay, so instead of we are using the model to request the creation of a new service. So we wanted to double check if we can use it also for service feasibility, not only creation. We need to do some cleanup on the service type and the signaling option type, so to avoid this some overlapping. I think that the term might still have some overlapping, so we need to double check on that. We need to review the PC security section. There are some minor things to add on the static routes. Also, we have from the original L3SM, we have the access to the content service to the cloud service provider. So we need to double check whether this still applies also to the network model. And we also need to use documentation of IPv4 addresses and IPv6 in the examples. Okay, so with just minor comments here. So please go to the last slide. So with this, we think that all the issues that we had when the publication of the last draft were solved. So just minor issues as left as explained. We are using all the common module. So we think this version is stable. It's not going to suffer major changes. So it's almost ready for the working group plus call. So as Med also said in the common module, the more eyes into the document, the better. So please check, because I think this is the document that is more stable. So if there are questions for this draft, if not, we can jump to the next one. Okay, so for the L2NM, as in the previous case, we updated the Young module to use the VPN common module groupings. Also, in the text, we started to do some editorial work to explain the common relation with the draft and add the different explanations of the groupings that are used, and some editorial improvements. So we explain the VPN profiles, the signal options, the VPN network access, connection, etc. I think there is still some work to do in the editorial, but we started doing that. So we also have a big change, as the full tree was too long. We cut it and dissected into subtrees in different sections. So then I think it is much readable. So next slide, please. So here, as we mentioned, the L3NM was very stable. This L2NM is much stable, but there is one major thing that we need to finalize to consider the draft, let's say, stable. And it's the complete VPN support. Okay, so I think among all the different layer 2 types, all of the others were pretty much covered, but the VPN still had some gaps. So in order to support the VPN creation, for the service type, we need to cover the different flavors of PVB VPN, VSLAN VPN, the classical VPN. We need to add the Ethernet segment identifier. And there are some specific service parameters like the ingress replication, the RP proxy, suppression, ND proxy, etc. So there are particular VPN parts, and also we need to cover the particular PVB service parameter. So for the PVB case, also we need the PVB VPN flavor. Also we need to cover the RTRDs that we are reusing all that from the VPN common module. We need to add this value. Also we reuse that for the VPN common. We need to add the bridge domain, the mod type, and also we need to add all the I and backbone identifier components to include them here. So next slide, please. So also related to the VPN, people is adding is contributing with a lot of issues. So here I just put a sample. Even after creating these slides, there were more comments recent or more issues recent in the JIT regarding eVPN. So you see that still we have quite a few work on the eVPN. Okay, and then we also have some common L2 things. So for example, we have an issue on how the precedent type is different from the access priority. When we were requested also to add examples of the L2NM. Okay, so similar that we did in the L3NM here to add some examples. And there is also an issue recent on there's a limit on the elements from point-to-point on services. Okay, so we need to solve this issue. So go to the next slide, please. So well, the next steps in this draft is, so mainly is complete the eVPN support, solve all the open issues that we have in GitHub, and of course here please send us reviews for this document. And because we think from all the three drafts, this is the one that still has some more work to do. And so we hope that the next version we can solve all these issues, and then we complete the pack for the next call, or the last call. So questions?
We have Rob in the queue.
Just as a participant, so just a quick question. I think you're splitting up of the tree output in the documents is useful. I did wonder whether or not it might also be useful to include the full tree output in the appendix. So I'm not sure I feel that strongly about it, but it's just something to consider maybe. It might make it too long, it may be a bit repetitive, but it's certainly something that's worth considering is whether that would be useful to readers of this document, or whether it just adds an extra 10 or 15 pages that isn't useful. I don't know, but maybe it's worth considering.
Okay, the thing with the full tree also, it was so long, not only in lines but also the length, it went very deep inside. So this is also why we decided to cut in subtrees. So yeah, but then we can definitely look at that.
Well, that sounds reasonable. Then that sounds like a reasonable answer, that if it ends up being so far indented due to the depth of it, then and it's not useful, then that makes sense. And it is always possible that people could generate this from tooling fairly easily anyway. So it's not too much of a concern. Okay.
Mohammed, you're next.
Med?
In addition to, I would say to the comment from Oscar that this will be, I would say, it will be split over tens of pages, and it's really hardly readable and parsable by the readers. There's also, I would say, one more logistic issue there, is that the current tools when generating, I would say, the Yank tree tables, we will end with the, I would say, we want to preserve the limit on the length, on the I would say on the lines, and the currently what we have done in the even with the extract and the subtree that we are pushing into the core document, we are modifying manually the tree so that you can pass the net check. So it will be really a nightmare for us if we include that one, because we won't have that possibility to modify manually the trees and so on. So I would personally avoid having that the default tree there. We can put it on the GitHub, and we already have a copy of that in the GitHub, and we can add a pointer if the working group won't decide that. But I wouldn't put again the default tree, because it's really a nightmare. And another question I have for the working group and also the chair is that, as you have seen in the presentation from Oscar, is that we have, I would say, a lot of issues currently in the IL2NM. So, and there is a risk that it depends on the activity and the energy that we will put on this one. But if we delay this, the VPN work and also the IL3NM document until we have, I would say, a frozen version on the IL2NM, we will do our best to have that, but there is a risk that that the work may last longer. So would it be fair if we, I would say, at the if we fix a milestone or a deadline to say that, yes, if by the mid of next year we don't have a stable version, or we still see comments on the IL2NM, it would be, I would say, feasible that we just run the working group last call on the IL2NM and the common model, or we have to get started on the IL2NM. So this is a risk I'm seeing on the set.
Rob, were you still in queue before I was gonna answer? But if you have something,
I'll just quickly reply to Med's first comment. Yes, I think it makes sense not to include the tree output. One other possibility would be just to have maybe the appendix instructions of how to generate that, or a pointer to how it could be generated. So that might be one alternative way of not including it, saying using this tooling you could generate the output this way. I don't know if that's useful or not, but I agree not including it. It's just going to be useless information.
So on your second comment, Med, I was going to try this fancy show of hands tool, and I'm asking a question. How many people have read the current versions of these L2, L3, NM drafts, as well as the common module? Raise your hand, please. I'd like to get an idea of how many working group eyes have been on this, just so we can get an idea towards your question of if there's been a number of people who've read this, and from an implementer's and an operator's standpoint, that feel the L3NM is ready, and the common module, importantly, is common enough, so to speak, then maybe, to your point, if there really is a struggle in L2NM, that there might be a need to call working group last call. Ideally, as I told a number of you and the authors, I think it would be good to do it all together. That said, I think there's definitely interest. I don't think leaving L2NM off would cause it to never progress. But I think there's value in making sure everything is properly sewed up on all of them. That's one chair's opinion. But it looks like so far, I don't know if we're going to get many more. 10 people have raised their hand that they have read it. 6 have not raised their hand, indicating that they have not read the latest versions. I've read the latest version of VPN Common and L3. I haven't gotten through L2 personally. So let me ask, I'll end this session. Should we do a working group last call of L3NM independently if issues still exist after 110 on L2NM? And by 110, I mean IETF 110 next spring 2021. So it seems that there is lots of hands going up quickly. I mean, we had 10 total hands raised on the last one. We have 7 hands raised, no hands not raised, 8 hands raised, more hands going up. So I think it's worth considering. I think chances are, if we put this out on the working group alias, that chances are that would be the case. I would, speaking as co-chair, encourage the people in the working group working on this to work through those issues. Let's see if we can get some more reviews, like we talked about a Yang Doctor's early review of the L2NM. Let's see if we can get some of those issues resolved. But it sounds like there's certainly interest in getting the L3NM out there, assuming that we make sure that the common module is sufficiently common. So hopefully that addresses your comments there, Med, or question, I should say.
Yes, thank you, Joe. And one last, I would say, information is that we have many implementers that are involved in this work, and we have an appendix in which we provide a pointer to each of these implementations, and all this information is available on the GitHub. So yeah, so this is a joint work which is currently done with the involvement of many people.
And I would also encourage you, speaking of the GitHub, come back if there are more eyes that you need on specific issues. You didn't ask a lot of pointed questions here in this presentation, and by you I mean Oscar presented, but in general the authors. If there are things that you want more broader eyes of the working group to get consensus on, please don't hesitate to ask those questions, and let's get that discussion going, or those discussions going on the list, so we can get through some of those issues.
So here, for this particular draft, I think the biggest thing that we need in the L2NM is more experts on EVPN. Okay, so I think it's what caused some more delay in advanced. It was getting people with knowledge from EVPN. Now we are getting it. Okay, so we are getting people that is implementing it and so on. But we need, if we can have more, maybe some. We could promote also the work maybe in BES and in other routine working groups to have their eyes into it.
Okay, that certainly is doable. We could request some eyes over there. I can reach out to the chairs as well over there and see if there's anyone we could get to get some reviewers looking at L2 and M to help out with some of those issues. Sorry, I didn't mean to monopolize time. You asked a chair question. Any other comments from co-chairs or from the other working group members? Don't see anyone coming in the queue, so I thank you, Med and Oscar, for presenting and for leading and continuing the work with the working group. Thanks.
So we go to the next one.
Mic check.
Yeah.
Mic
Good,
check.
Randy. Yep. Check. You're loud and clear.
Okie doke. This draft was revised during adoption, so take it home, feed it, and be nice to it, and it should be good to you. The suspects, I don't know why Massimo wanted to start this. I did most of the drafting work. Warren and Eric Klein, who's too modest to be here, from Google, brought in the Google work, which you'll see, and Russ did the security stuff. Next slide, please. IP geolocation is to deal with country regulations and localization, et cetera, i.e., there's a special version of Game of Thrones playing in Washington, D.C. now. And you're not supposed to see it anywhere else. Next slide, please. Who does geolocation? Here are organizations providing the service of, if you have an IP address, they will give you a good guess as to where it is. The quality of the guesses vary considerably. There are even researchers who've compared them. So next slide, please. If you go to watch that, next slide, please. If you go to watch that version of Game of Thrones and you can't, i.e., if your data for your IP address are incorrect, you have to contact all of those people. And they take weeks to turn things around. And you see people putting out pleas on Nanog every week saying, I'm in Bialystok and I can't watch whatever. Next slide, please. The basic problem is that this is uncoordinated, and all those different providers of information are kind of almost doing research. So there's no real data repository. There is no ground truth. Okay. Next slide, please. So how do they come up with their guesses? Heavily use of DNS data and whois data. DNS in the sense of lots of routers have location in their names, et cetera, et cetera. Tons of strange magic. But to the rescue, a gang of pretty much Googlers who have this problem big time, of course, came up with RFC 8805, which is a definition of a CSV file, which can, for prefixed ranges, have country and state or whatever, city, and that's the granularity, because finer, they're worried about, in some places, if you get down to the postal code, it reveals personal information too much. So this is about the limit of the game. But RFC 8805 describes geofeeds files. Next, thank you. The format is in the RFC. You publish only what you want to publish. It's flexible. You can geolocate single IPs entire prefixes, it's those prefix match, of course, and whatever level you want it to. For instance, you could publish only the country or all the way down to the city level. It has been adopted by Google and a whole bunch of those providers I listed on slide 3. Next slide, please. To discuss the GeoFeed format, you can go to the GeoFeeds working group. There isn't one, but let's not discuss it here. Next slide, please. But how do you find GeoFeed files? That's the problem. Okay, or at least that's the problem this draft tries to address. Next slide, please. We use the IRR whois, and these are the INetNum objects that are the external visible allocation records of the RIR that says for this range, this is the authoritative record. Since we cannot modify this easily, and you'll see that we have a proposal for doing so, it has a remarks field, and in that remarks field, the person, the organization which controls the INetNum, which is the admin and tech contacts who have that address space, put this URL of where you can find a file with the GeoFeed information for that address range in the INetNum. Next slide, please. Remarks? That's disgusting. Next slide, please. The next gen of the IRR records will instead have a GeoFeed attribute. But of course, that's all in the RPSL working group, except there isn't one. So the RIRs are talking and conspiring, and maybe this will come out. In the meantime, you learn to eat both and deprecate one when the remarks field when it's later. There's a cute trick about using this whois data. Next slide, please. That when you query it for a particular address, the whois server returns the closest covering range. So this works much better than a hack like DNS, where you would have to have an exact record for that address. Okay, so this is just God knows why this happens in whois, but that's what the RIRs do, and it's really kind of nice. Next slide, please. Now remember, an INetNum points to a GeoFeed file, but multiple INetNums can point to the same GeoFeed file. And when you go to fetch following a particular INetNum, you close your eyes to all the ones not covered by that INetNum. Okay, so use the longest match and only what is covering. Next slide, please. And of course, there's an INet6 num. Multiple of them can point to the same file. Please feed them over HTTPS. And now we get into why Russ is here, which is an optional authenticator may be appended, because there's a problem. The authenticity of an INetNum in the whois, let's say that the quality of update controls varies across whois systems, across RIRs. So is the GeoFeed data really authorized? The INetNum provides you some assurance So what we propose is to have a digest of the main body of the file, the piece you've been looking at, is digested and then signed by the private key of the relevant RPKI certificate for the covering prefix. This is optional. By the way, of course, Aaron, being a unicorn, doesn't use INET nums, they use net range, but it's the same act. Next slide, please. Here's an example of the strong signature. Okay, it's now, because it is signed by the key of the RPKI record for that range, that signature cannot be good for some other geofeed pointer into this file. So when there's a signature, it can only represent one address space. Next slide, please. You can parse bulk whois data. The RIRs all provide bulk data over FTP, et cetera, et cetera. Aaron is a unicorn, of course. You can ask and the geo providers get it and use the data. And you can get the net range from bulk and comments from whois and RDAP. Next slide, please. And of course, there's an app for that. It's on GitHub. There's the URL. You get a Linux binary and or sources and all the other usual things. You run the darn thing. It goes to all the RIRs. It fetches all the whois data, and it produces a results CSV file to cover everything for you if you're doing lookups. And that's the story. We really appreciate more reviews. Reviews, by the way, people have been very helpful. And we don't want to threaten WGLC just to get more review, but we would really appreciate it. And of course, Massimo would love people to run his code. And this is in use. Questions?
Questions?
Let me check the chat.
There are a few comments in the chat from George Michelson and Tom Hill, Randy. It looks like, in general, support for this work. George has said people don't understand that almost all economy assertions in whois for numbers are about the entity head office location and not the network of use unless the records are more specific than the delegation record. And Randy's on the money with this draft. It is a huge problem. So Tom just +1'd it. So I think there's in general support on this.
NTT is in Tokyo, right? I'm at the end of an NTT circuit here in California now. Somebody popped in the queue for a moment.
I was off that screen. Any other comments for Randy? Questions?
Answers. It's been fun. Thank you.
Thanks, Randy.
So we go to the next slide.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. My name is Edna, and I'll be presenting IPFX information element extension for forwarding exceptions. This is the first time we are presenting this in the IETF, and I'll be presenting this on behalf of my co-authors, Shivam Ved, Aditya Ale, and Devang Patel. Next slide, please. So just to give you some background on what the draft is. When you think of a network, traffic drops are generally normal, and they often go unnoticed unless there is an end service that is impacted. So detecting and identifying and repairing the traffic drop in huge networks can be mechanical and very tedious. So in order to eliminate this tedious workflow in identifying and repairing the networks, we can focus on simply localizing the problem and building correlation to some entities which are responsible for dropping the packets. If you the drop packets can undergo some deep inspection and the some metadata can be fetched from these drop packets, can be sent to the host or the software queue along with the type of exception that has invoked this drop, and some metadata in this case like in and out interface and some other metadata which I'll be covering in the next slides. Next slide, please. So yeah, as I just mentioned, so the exception information may be exported in any format that is desired. We can also use YANG or IPFix. So this proposal specifically focuses on IPFix for exporting the drop packet information. So some of the information elements that can be used to export metadata already exist. This draft defines new information elements along with the corresponding formats for these new information elements needed for the metadata. Next slide, please. The forwarding exceptions that we'll be focusing on are that generally responsible for the traffic drop. The information elements that we report as part of this mechanism may change based on the type of forwarding exception that has occurred on a particular network. This subset of information may be really key in order to identify where the traffic drop is in a huge network. So if when a packet drop happens or when a traffic drop happens, what is the reason for the traffic drop? Which flow has encountered this drop? Which includes the packet content, which gives us the source port, and destination port, source IP, destination IP, and a few other details. And some additional metadata, including what the flow direction is, what the next hop index is, input and output interfaces, and a few other details if needed. Next slide, please. So focusing on this draft, we have proposed a new information element called forwarding exception code, which is a unique identifier describing the reason for the traffic drop, or some irregularity or some traffic drop. So we have this particular forwarding exception code can have different data records indicating what forwarding error has caused the traffic drop. So this can be we have identified a few common ones. An implementation may choose to encode its own internal device exception codes. In such scenarios, enterprise bit may be set to 1, or else if an implementation may choose to use the common identified exception codes, they may set the enterprise bit to 0. Next slide, please. In addition to the forwarding exception code, we also had the need to export what the next hop ID is. Next hop ID is something that identifies the destination inside a particular device, typically represented in a forwarding path as an index. So this is very useful in order to fetch more details on what the next hop looks like, and the next hop that the packet would take. In order to do some deep inspection. So this next hop ID could include some information about the outgoing interface and forwarding features configured on the packet path, etc. So there's a unique identifier on every device. So this is something that will be really useful in identifying the next hop details on every packet. Next slide, please. This basically captures what a dropped exception packet would look like in IPFX. It includes some of the fields that are key in order to identify the which device is dropping the packets and which flow is actually encountering this drop. So it can be represented in any format, any which format. We see two different formats here. And any number of fields, any number of other metadata fields can be added to this template. So this is just a representation of how we capture different information elements from every device in order to specifically point out which entity has undergone some traffic drop and what is the reason for it. Next slide, please. So yes, since this is the first time we are presenting this, we are looking for some feedback, and if you have any questions, suggestions, they're absolutely welcome. So.
Questions? So I had one as a contributor on the next hop ID. I wasn't really clear on what that would be, or I imagine this would be something that's very vendor specific, and there would be some way of decoding that 64-bit value, because you don't really give a very prescriptive. You said it could be egress interface, it could be other forwarding characteristics, but there's nothing that I saw in the draft that was like, here's an example, or anything prescriptive of what that could be. And I know in one template you have egress interface there, so I imagine there's other richness that would give you, but I wasn't clear on exactly how I would, if I was implementing this, how I would populate that.
Yes. So next up, we'll add an example for the next hop ID in the next revision.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
We have two in the queue. Jinben? Question? And Ben, we can't hear you if you're asking, if you're speaking.
Okay. Yeah. I think this is hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello. I think this. Okay. Yeah. Robin from Huawei. I think this is truly a useful use case. Yeah, because we know that in the IP there's always something the forwarding errors. So I think the detailed information experts will to help the troubleshooting. I think this is useful use cases. Yeah. Okay.
And we have Shivam in the queue.
Thanks, Edna.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, hey, I'm one of the co-authors for this, so I think there was a question related to what does the next hop actually mean, right? So I just wanted to add, so imagine, let's say in a normal forwarding path, a packet arrives, you do a lookup in the forwarding table, right? Typically, the result of the lookup is a next hop. That next hop is nothing, but it represents a forwarding path that the packet will eventually take. And it is supposed to translate into packet going out of a specific interface. So obviously, if packet is able to successfully go out of that interface, then you will also have the egress interface metadata information set as is displayed in the template, right? But let's say the drop happens somewhere in between, right? You need to know which path the packet was taking. So next hop ID in that case can be that ID, which internal to your system represents that forwarding path, and let's say a bunch of show commands on your node or metadata that you have elsewhere on the controller can be used to correlate, saying that this next hop ID actually represented this outgoing interface, and therefore the packet dropped during this processing over this path. So that is pretty much the semantic.
Okay. Yeah, I think seeing an example or understand that could certainly help, because it feels kind of nebulous the way it's written right now. But thanks for that.
Sure. We'll cover that.
Other questions? Rudiger, I see you in the queue as well. Rudiger, we can't hear you.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, we can hear you now.
Fine. I would suggest to look at the question of how to format and how to define the schema for the data afresh. I highly suggest when to look at CDDL schema and CBOR encoding, and removing essentially the need for interpreting large ASCII art.
Sure, Rudiger. Could you? Yeah, that's interesting comment. So we will look into it. Could you also respond on the mailing list? We'll follow up that.
I'll try.
Thank you. And I'd encourage to everyone to review this, and any comments or suggestions would be really great. Thank you, folks.
Thanks.
Okay, let's go to the next presentation. Shuanglong.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Shuanglong Chen from Huawei. In fact, for IETF, I'm a newcomer, and I'm very happy to join such a big family. Okay, today my topic is network monitoring of IDP. Next slide, please. First, I introduce the previous work. Last year, a draft about the network-wide protocol the monitoring is submitted. Some use cases are identified in it. Our original the motivations are as follows. First is the quickly reporting, especially the IDP protocols contains need to be reported quickly. And the second is the high performance. First thing maybe the binary encoding has the more better the performance than other encoding. And the third is we want to get a protocol that is easier to standardize. And the last is the wide monitoring scope. At first, we want to support the includes the IDP, LDP, and SVT, and RIB, and so on. In fact, the idea about the monitoring the IDP, and the first present at the 105 the IETF meeting. Okay, next slide, please. Let me talk about the recent changes. With the input from the customer discussion and the new standard process and the demo verification result, we identified some IDP use case. And also the performance we find is similar between the telemetry based and the BMP Lite. And the last change is the scope. We find in fact for RIB, we find the YAM module for the RIB has been defined in IFC 8431. And about the SPT and LDP, with the rapid development of the SR segment routing technologies, the SPT and LDP is replaced. So this is the current draft. We focus on the IGP only. Okay, next slide, please. Here at least two IGP use cases. The first one is ISIS router flapping. The localizing of the flapping cells and the identifying of the root causes haven't been easy work due to various reasons. The cause may be the system being conflict, or acid nip-shaped flapping, or root cause flapping, and so on. And the last use case is SDB synchronization failure during the acid flooding. However, sometimes the LFP synchronization failure happens. The cause maybe has a lot. Maybe the first is LFP is not correctly advised, or transmission error, or is received but not correctly processed. Oh, this is the two use case for ASIS. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. So according the we introduce the case and the original motivations. So we stress the two solution options. The option one is BMP-like. We can also define the new BMP message types and reusing BMP framework or new protocol. And option two is telemetry based. We can define the YAM module for ASIS the message. So that's all. Okay. Any question? Thank you.
Looks like Robin's back at the mic. Robin?
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, Robin from Huawei. I add some of the points besides the presentation. In fact, we truly have this work 2 years ago, but we later we explain we found that there's a lot of things happens in the routing area, so that. These are the point that we truly identify the possible use cases that's necessary to export the IGP protocol data. I mean, the LSA packet or the LSP PDU packets for the troubleshooting or other usage. But from our point of view, maybe it's a little difficult to defend the YAM model for such work. So that we want to limit the scope of this work and try to unify the IGP and the BGP to export the protocol related data with a similar mechanism. That's the work. So I wanted to collect the feedback from the working group and also the OPS area. Yeah, that's I add this point for the clarification. Yeah.
Thanks. I would suggest I haven't seen this round any discussion on the Ops AWG list. I would suggest raising the points you want to get clarity on there, and the previous time the related work was presented. I think people from I want to say Grow, as I recall, commented. So it might be good to get. Just to get their take on this as well from the routing area. It sounds like maybe you've already done some of that, but bringing that into the working group would be useful to trigger or catalyze some of those conversations on list.
Okay, okay. Okay. We will try to do this work and also use it to engage the grow area and also the routing area people. Okay.
Thanks. And Rob, you're in queue.
Yes, I've not read this draft. I'm just looking at the slides here. I think the big question for me is still as to why we'd want a new protocol here, rather than trying to use what's already there. And specifically on the first slide, there's a comment saying that it'd be easier to define a new protocol than to try and define the data that needs to be exported in Yang. And I'm struggling to understand why that is. And even in the case that you may not want to expand the PDUs out into the Yang, you could still carry them in a Yang data model encoded as binary PDUs of binary data. So I think for me, the key thing here is to try and understand the data you're trying to export off, and to understand clearly what doesn't work with the existing protocols. Have they been tried before we go down the path of trying to invent a new protocol here? Because that would seem to be significantly more work, naively.
Robin from Huawei. Hi, Robert. I understand your point. In fact, in this draft, this is not to propose this the new protocol. Here is also mentioned because in this draft we propose that the reusing the BMP for this requirement is just to extend several the message type only used for the IGP. So this is the proposal in this draft. And also you mentioned that's the possible this is the Yang model. Yeah, because we also is learned discuss with some of the Yang model experts, and also because we a little concern is that to export the protocol the packets through the Yang model. We are not experienced enough in this one, so we would like to collect more feedback through this the mailing list. Well, thanks very much for your comments. Okay.
Just to add one more comment to that, then again it goes back to, I think, focus on clearly what the data is that you want to export, and then that might help guide you with what the right answer is. And it may be that actually that you want to try and do it both ways. I have BMP extensions, if that's possible. I don't know BMP very well, and also define it in Yang. One other comment was about the encoding performance of using XML or JSON, and a different path there is to use either CBOR as a binary encoding. I know that NetConf doesn't support that today, but that is something there's been some interest in, or to use GPB if you go through that stack.
Okay. Thanks.
Other questions? Actually, I think we probably want to move on to give ops area some time. So yes, please take your questions to the list, Robin. Thanks. Oh, I think you're up.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And this is Paul. I'm going to present this VPN performance monitor Yang model on behalf of all the other authors. Next, please. Oh, it seems not complete with the figure, but actually this figure is from RFC 4176. It's about the framework for layer 3 VPN operational and management. And this figure is about the customer view of the different VPN manager function. And you can see on the bottom of this figure, there's a VPN assurance function there. So it means that the customer doesn't, aside from the order implementation, then they also want some performance monitoring to provide it to evaluate whether the product is in good condition. Then next, please. And then, I mean the previous one, it seems, yeah. And this is also from the same draft. And the last page is from the customer view, and from the network view, the provider management system must monitor the devices, those devices that to implement the service. The way the goal is to evaluate the performance, whether they match the service SLS. So I will. So that's the intention here. Then next slide, please. Given the working group has already worked on the modeling based framework for automation of service and network management, we can see that the figure is from the automation draft, and layer 3NM and layer 2NM have been developed to fit for the service delivery automation process, but the performance monitoring and notification is still missing there. So this draft is trying to fill this gap. So this is our intention of this draft. So next, please. Next slide, please. Our modeling approach is to augment RFC 8345 because it has defined the basic network topology. So our thinking is we can augment that draft with a more VPN performance monitor data to extend it on it, so we can see a whole picture of the VPN services on the performance monitor part. So you can see in this figure, the position of this model is a similar position as the service network models. So next slide, please. Then in this slide, I give some example on the relationship with the VPN performance monitor model and the 8345, the basic network topology model. Our consideration, our proposal is to extend the nodes and sometimes links or termination points with corresponding VPN data on it. So in that way, we can not only associate the VPN services with the underlay network topology, but also we can see on top of that what's the current VPN statistics is, like what kind of topology and what's the current VPN root data on each site, the usage data on that. And on the bottom, I give some example on the how this model being created. Like after the VPN service configuration has completed, then the existing OM mechanism can be used to collect the different data of VPN services. So in the third step, we can collect the telemetry data of VPN interfaces, tunnel nodes, and to calculate the aggregate VPN service data. Then, and also we can have the abstract topology on it. Next, please. So here, I will go to the detail of the model. The basic idea here is just to, we augment node, link, and also termination point to extend more VPN related data on it. And also we think we can use, reuse current netconf YAM push or subscription model to subscribe those data from the devices. So this is a model. So next, please. This draft has been discussed in last IETF meeting, and also we also give some also proposed to be discussed in one of the layer 3 NM working core meeting. So we have some comments from there, so we updated the draft to satisfy those comments. So we think this draft is try to fill the missing pieces of the whole closed loop YAM based system. So so we propose this draft to be included to VPN document sets. And also we think this draft is quite stable for the working group adoption. So that's all for this presentation. Thank you. We'd like to hear more comments on this draft. Thank you.
Questions? Don't see anyone coming up. Bo, thanks for presenting. The on the question of last call, so I went and looked because I remembered you presenting this before, but I don't recall ever seeing discussion on the list about it, and I couldn't find any. I did find it mentioned in like you said, in some of the other VPN-related conversations. It sounds like it's great that the core team working on this is discussed this, and I don't doubt that iterations have happened there, but to bring that back to the list would be very useful to get more eyes on it, more of the discussion, so it doesn't feel like it's coming out of nowhere if we do a last call. So if you could even bring it and announce it, talk about some of the issues that you've address some of the conversation that's happened on those core calls, that would be very useful to get some recorded conversation, recorded discussion about this, so then we can get to calling for a working group consensus on adoption.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there any more questions and comments? No, let's go ahead.
So Elliot, how fast can you be?
Very. This is a very quick update. How about 5 minutes?
Okay, then we'll give it over to you, Rob and Warren.
Okay, so this is just a very simple update on a previous draft. The next slide, please. This is all about software bills of material, which I presented on the last time, and the use of software bills of material is to determine, amongst other things, what sort of vulnerabilities a system has and what sort of exposure a network might have to particular vulnerabilities. One of the challenges, we now know how to write these things, but we don't necessarily know how to retrieve them. in a standardized way. And so this draft is working on how to retrieve them. And it solves it in several ways. One is via a well-known prefix, and the other is via MUD extension. We've explored other ways, but these are the ways that we're moving with thus far. Next slide, please. Now, this is an update of a previous draft. This draft focuses far less on MUD and far more on SBOMs and how to share. The introduction has been rewritten to make that clear, but largely speaking, the content in terms of the model for MUD is the same, and we have the definition of the well-known suffix defined. The security considerations have been added to. There's one or two more mechanisms we want to add in terms of being able to advertise different sorts of retrieval mechanisms. There are a couple of other protocols that we would add, but that's a very small change. And we need to add a little bit of non-normative text to describe those mechanisms. But that's really about it. Next slide, please. So a couple of points just to mention. Michael has raised one or two other issues around this draft. They're nothing that are showstoppers. We talked about possibly adopting it last time, and maybe it's worth starting the call for adoption if you guys are up for it, or we should do that, say, real soon now. Even if we do adopt it, I would expect it to take a little while to get through the process, simply because we want to sync with a couple of the other protocol developers that are doing this, and some of them are inside and outside the IETF. And that's it. How's that?
That was quick. Yeah. Questions? Henk?
Yeah, hi, as an individual. Hi, Elliot. You were talking in the last slide about retrieval and some hints, maybe. I am aware that Stephen Bangert and Dave Waltermeyer from NIST were introducing the ROLI mechanism to retrieve software inventory-related information. Maybe that's something to look at here.
Yeah, I mean, so the purpose of this work is to point at the different types of mechanisms. There's not going to be a single one, but I think it's probably, you're right, we should make sure that we're coordinating with them. This draft, by the way, is co-authored by Scott Rose, also from NIST, so I'll make sure that he's talking to his colleagues.
Sounds good, thanks.
But that also bears on the next discussion, one of the next discussions, right, which is coordinating all this.
And I have seen the discussion on this. I think we can bring adoption to the list. We seem to have enough interest, at least, and see how well it would be supported for adoption.
And there is at least a little bit of running code. It's not perfect, but there is some.
Great. Thanks, Elliot.
Thank you.
So that's Opsawg. I hand it over to you, Rob and Warren. I think we got your slides up. They're now in Data Tracker.
Do you want me to share the screen, or?
Yeah, Rob,
or
do you
can share the screen yourself?
Tianran, if you're willing to share, that would be great. I think that's more likely to work than us trying to play it. I haven't done a screen share through Meetecho, so I will save the time.
I was able to load the slides, Tianran, if you want me to try and share them. Or if you've got them up, that's fine too.
I stopped the sharing.
Okay. Let's see if I can do this. Select. That's going to look weird. How about this? That look good?
Yes, you might want a little bit bigger if that's possible.
Can you still see it?
No,
Black.
You're sharing your audio now.
Okay, let me try this. I think we learned from select. Oh, maybe oh, screen 1. Now I bet you can see it.
Yep.
That's good. Yeah.
Okay, all you
Thank
then.
you. So, so welcome to the ops area part of the meeting, and from Warren and I. And I think the main thing we would like to discuss here is have some discussion on the IT ops working group charter that we're trying to chart at the moment. I would also like to mention that Warren and I having an ops area ADs meeting after this, so that's on the agenda. If anyone is interested in talking to Warren and I, there's an opportunity. I will try and remember to put a link into that at the end of this as well. So if anyone wants to have any further discussion issues with Warren and I, there's an opportunity after this meeting during the break. So so to give some background here, could we go on to the next slide, please? So there's been discussion about having some sort of IoT-based working group for quite a long time in the ISG, lot longer than before I joined. And in the last 4 months or so, Warren and I have been trying a lot harder to try and get that chartered and set up. And I think we're almost over the hill now. But it's but worth discussing. The aim of this is to really have a focal point for discussion of issues related to IoT, operational issues, and also trying to act as almost like a coordination point where lots of different work is happening in the IETF on protocols related to IoT, but sometimes it's hard to coordinate all of those or know what's going on. And the idea here for IoT Ops is to have a working group where that can sort of be coordinated in some way and discussed and things, so people know what's going on, and gives an opportunity for people outside of IETF to be able to bring new IoT related work into the IETF if they don't quite know where it should go. So at the moment, there's a perception that it's sort of quite hard if you're external to IETF and have got work related to IoT to know where to bring it. There's no sort of focal point. And the aim of this working group is to try and do that. It's a bit different from a regular working group in the sense that it's expected to be a bit more discussion focused and related rather than just working on producing documents. So it has a bit more of a MOPS feel, if any of you are aware of MOPS. But the expectation is it can do some work. So it's okay for it to be discussing informational documents or BCPs and to be discussing potential new work. But the aim is that if new work is identified, that will then need to be further discussion about where that work happens. So it might be that that goes to one of the existing working groups or another area. It might be that we need to spin up a new working group to do that work, or there is a possibility that it might even be possible to do that in IoT Ops, but there would need to be further discussion with the ISG to decide if that was feasible for small bits of work. So at the moment, the aim is for that to be outside the charter, that it can't do protocol work. But if that does come up, we can have another look to see what the best way of doing that is. Next slide, please. So some discussion points. It's worth saying that there's actually been some further discussion this week on this, and I think we've sort of resolved some of this, I believe. The general agreement between the discussions we've had is that still should not do protocol work directly, and instead it says here perform a dispatch function. I think again the word dispatch isn't necessarily the best choice, and we might take that out of the charter. The idea is really that like any working group, if there is discussion about particular work that needs to happen, and it's not the right place, then this working group would help to redirect that work to other places or work out where the best place for that work to occur is. But it doesn't need to follow a very strict dispatch model where the conversation is focused purely only on how you dispatch the documents and not on the content at all. We would see there to be a bit more flexibility to discuss some of the content of the work first before deciding how best to proceed with that work in the IETF, if that was appropriate to do so. As it says here, it can work on architectural requirements. That's fine. I think everyone's happy. And as I said before, if there's a need to do protocol work, then one possibility is that it might read charter to do small bits of protocol work, if that's appropriate. But we would look at that on a case-by-case basis and would have discussions with the ISG first to see if that's okay. So the next couple of slides have the charter text on there. I'm not sure whether we need to bring that up, but really the question is now is, does anyone have any comments or points they would like to raise? So I would like to open this up really for discussion now. It might be worth asking if Warren wants to add any more colour to what I'm saying.
Well, thank you.
Tell us.
Hi, yeah, thanks for this. So this has been well, a lot more than the 9 months. Something like this should have taken the most. So so I do think the one area that, you know, on quick look I didn't see quite was that, you know, the aspect of TOI from, you know, IoT application solutions to, you know, people doing the network layer part or the protocol stuff, and vice versa. I think that would be a really cool thing if we could get more of that, right? So in terms of that, I would love to see, you know, getting more outreach to people from the industry presenting on their stuff, even if, you know, the only outcome is this would be a presentation for TOI during such a meeting. And the second high-level comment, I think, is that the one thing I'm worried about is to unnecessarily constrain things to be called IoT when they're not. And I don't want to have, you know, a stupid discussion about what the heck is IoT and what is not IoT to stand in the way, but for in terms of simply using the group for the discussion. But then, you know, as appropriate, also point out that, you know, something may not be limited to IoT. And I think the best example to me is that the, you know, Phil, I think, was having a good definition of IoT, which was kind of not the typical devices with a real user interface during this enrollment discussions we had. I think that equally applies to, you know, routers and switches and all the other networking gear we had so far. But I don't think we have traditionally called routers and switches IoT, you know, big service provider, core router or so. But I think a lot of the, you know, life cycle management problems we have for that equipment is very equal to, you know, what we would more likely call IoT. So I'm not quite sure how to bring that appropriately into the charter, but just functionally, that would be something I'd be concerned about.
Okay, to answer both those 2 points, on the first one, yes, it's definitely a desire for people to be able to bring like TOIs and information from other places here. So that is one of the desires, that this is a forum where people can make those presentations. And that's actually one of the reasons why we wanted it to be a working group rather than just a mailing list, is to have that time in the agenda such that those presentations could occur. So that's definitely a goal here. I don't know whether it's helpful to have anything in the charter related to that or not. So that's a question to have, or whether it's sufficient just to be able to understand what's there. In terms of the second question, in terms of defining what IoT is, I think we want to try really hard not to do that. And I guess I've given some partial definition of what it means in this case, and I think we can be fairly flexible with its scope. I think mostly people will know it when they see it, and we don't need to worry too much about it, and give the the chairs of the working group some flexibility in terms of what they define IoT, and if it looks like it's becoming going out of scope, then we can rein it in again. But I think for the moment, it'd be better just to have a loose definition, see how it progresses, and if we need to tweak anything after 6 months or a year, then we can do so. But I'd hope that we can get it set up and assume the best intentions first. Warren, would you like anything to add anything to that?
So then, just to largely agree, I think that, you know, we've been trying to get something like this done for a very long time. We keep running into the perfect being the enemy of the good for getting it set up. And so getting something started so we can at least begin discussions, and then, you know, rechartering once we've proven that we're not completely crazy, I think would be a safer way to go. For obvious reasons, you know, there's a number of concerns about scope creep or just trying to take over work that's being done in other areas, and I think that's where some of the sensitivity is coming from.
Yeah, as I said, I didn't mean to. I was explicitly saying let's not take my comment as something to make life harder, but rather be, you know, more inclusive. So as to not partition the discussion unnecessarily along the definition.
Yes, I think that sounds fine.
Okay, before Elliot gets this line in queue, there was a question from Eric on the chat, basically asking if this IoT Ops working group would render the IoT Directorate kind of obsolete, or basically how the consequences there and interactions are.
So my answer is I would assume not. I would assume that the IoT Directorate still serves a very useful purpose for doing reviews of documents that are IoT related. I'd rather those go to an IoT Directorate rather than coming to this working group. So I'd see that continuing. I don't know exactly everything that goes on in the IoT Directorate. I've only joined it relatively recently. I know some of the sort of discussion and coordination that's happening there. It may end up that this is a better forum for that, if that answers your question, Eric. So no, I don't think it should be obsoleted. I do think we should just see how it progresses once this is up and running.
So this is Warren. Yeah, I mean, I think it's more sort of complementary and kind of like what MCR said in the chat. You know, maybe the coordination calls become more SAG-like. I don't know.
Which echoes Michael's comment on the list. Oh, sorry. So we have only 4 minutes left. So Elliot.
I'll just be brief and say that I think this is a perfectly fine idea. I think it's actually way overdue. And I think Warren and Rob and all of those preceding area directors have taken a swing at this. The text to me is good. The only thing I will just add is that I do view the IoT ops stuff more as, you know, to make sure that the left, two aspects, right? It's a locus for new work so that, you know, people want to come into the IETF, they can at least hear about what's going on in IoT and then maybe bring some work along their, on their own. The second is to keep us from tripping over ourselves. And to that end, there's just approving the working group won't get us there. We'll need, it's necessary but not sufficient. It will need to be the case that the IESG and everybody have to sort of do some outreach to make sure that anything that, you know, really is IoT-like at least gets, you know, discussed, brought in for discussion. You know, not so much that the work gets done in IoT ops, but just that people are aware of how it all fits together, and people need to come together and be in that room for that purpose. And that will require a little bit of work, and it's a little countercultural.
So I think that sounds fine, Elliot. I think that all makes sense.
So are still in the queue? Sorry.
Tell us.
Okay, let's consider the mic closed.
So I think that sounds everything. Thank you for the feedback, and hopefully we'll be able to get this up and running soon. So I'll just try and find the link for the ops area. Opsawg office hours. So in case anyone wants to join, Warren and I will be here for the next half an hour. So I've just put that into the chat, but otherwise I think we can call the ops area part of the meeting also closed. Thank you everyone for their time.